Welcome to this explainer. If you really stop to think about it, the mechanics of power and exploitation have shifted in some pretty wild ways over the centuries. Today, we're going to unpack a fascinating and honestly kind of unexpected journey. We are tracing how systemic exploitation evolved, starting all the way back with the coastal trade wars of 17th century colonial India, right up to the crushing reality of today's engineering education system. It's a pretty eye-opening look at how control changes shape. So let's get into it.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We'll be covering the Dutch in India, South Indian resistance, universities and military ties, modern educational exploitation, and finally, the real engineering crisis.
Starting off with Section 1, the Dutch in India.
Right out of the gate, we've got to shatter a major historical misconception. When the Dutch East India Company, the VOC, showed up in India back in 1605, they didn't just march in and conquer massive inland empires like the Mughals. That was the British East India Company's playbook much later on. Actually, the Dutch were laser-focused on coastal trading posts. They wanted spices, textiles, indigo, and their main rivals weren't even local kings at first. They were fighting the Portuguese to hijack those super lucrative trade routes.
So instead of building massive empires, they set up highly strategic strongholds. They essentially booted the Portuguese out of very specific, tactical ports. We're talking headquarters at Pulicat on the Coromandel coast, taking over Cochin on the Malabar coast, and setting up shop in places like Surat and Bengal. They heavily influenced the edges of the subcontinent, modern-day Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Andhra Pradesh, rather than trying to swallow up the vast interior.
Moving right along to Section 2, South Indian Resistance.
If you look at the time between 1498 and 1664, it's just continuous waves of European powers entering South India. The Portuguese, the Dutch, the British, the French, they all wanted a piece. The region was incredibly contested. It wasn't just handed over on a silver platter, it was literally one of the most fiercely fought-over regions on Earth because of its insane sea trade wealth.
But here's the thing, local rulers fought back hard. In 1741, King Marthandavarma of Travancore pulled off something absolutely incredible. He decisively crushed the Dutch at the Battle of Kulachel. This is a massive deal because it stands out as one of the very first major Asian victories over a European colonial power. It really marked the beginning of the end for the Dutch in India, proving beyond a doubt that local powers were formidable.
All right, Section 3, universities and military ties.
So we're shifting gears now from historical colonial empires to the immense power of modern academic empires in the West. If the Dutch and the Portuguese fought tooth and nail over physical ports and spices, what exactly is the currency of power for modern juggernauts like Stanford or MIT? How does an institution actually build that kind of modern dominance?
Well, were these modern giants built as colonial rulers or on direct slave trading foundations? No, there isn't direct evidence of that, though they obviously exist within the broader context of American expansion. But were they built on war-linked research? Absolutely, yes. Their massive institutional power is deeply, undeniably tied to the military.
It was this exact military-industrial ecosystem, not overseas colonial conquest, that laid the actual groundwork for Silicon Valley today. Stanford and MIT became completely entangled in Cold War defense research. Funding from defense agencies like DARPA literally helped create the foundations for AI, networking, aerospace, and semiconductors. The empire we see here is an empire of technology, heavily funded by military interests.
Which brings us to Section 4, Modern Educational Exploitation.
We're bridging this history of systemic power directly to the incredibly personal, real-world struggles of modern engineering students, especially in India. And it brings us to a really stark, provocative question that tons of frustrated students are asking right now. When you pour in massive amounts of money and time, only to be totally stressed out, handed outdated materials, and left with zero real skills, is that a modern form of slavery? Because so many students feel completely trapped by it.
Now, we need to be really precise here to validate this pain accurately. It isn't literal slavery. Slavery is the tragic, complete removal of legal freedom. Even a terribly underpaid clerk job is still labor for wages with legal freedom. But what students are experiencing today, that is absolutely a devastating system of economic exploitation. It's low-value education, runaway credential inflation, and intense economic pressure that's basically masquerading as an opportunity.
Students are caught in this relentless loop where they're treated as customers, not learners. Step 1, pay ridiculously high fees. Step 2, memorize completely outdated question papers just to pass exams. Step 3, graduate without any of the actual practical skills the market demands. And Step 4, struggle endlessly to find a job. The colleges are optimizing for their pass percentages and placement stats, not for giving you real, functional engineering ability.
And that leads us to our final section, the real engineering crisis.
There is a staggering mismatch causing this entire crisis. The job market is desperate for real engineering. They want people who can build, fail, test, design, and fix actual problems. They want to see portfolios. They want practical debugging skills. But what does college testing actually measure? Memory, speed, and how fast you can reproduce a formula. You're sitting there writing theory when you should be getting your hands dirty building systems.
It basically boils down to a pretty depressing equation. Money in, time lost, weak output. This frustration is incredibly valid. It hits hard when students realize they aren't being shaped into masters of technology at all. They're being prepped for clerk-like roles that just require following basic instructions. The gap between your paper qualifications and real mastery has literally never been wider.
But look, there are paths forward. While no institution is perfectly pure from political or economic systems, there are alternatives that carry way less historical baggage and better align with pure technological pursuits. We're talking about post-independence institutions in India like the IITs or NITs, or younger, hyper-focused tech universities in Asia like those in Singapore or South Korea, and modern technical universities in Europe. These places tend to focus way more on the actual craft of engineering rather than just an exploitative fee structure.
So, I want to leave you with this final thought to really reflect on as you map out your own educational path. You've seen how empires operate, whether they're Dutch ships hoarding spices, Western universities hoarding defense contracts, or modern colleges hoarding fees. The real question is, are you just going to accept a low-value paper qualification from a system designed to exploit? Or are you going to demand the real engineering mastery you actually deserve? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the systems around you.